FPL Game Week 11, the top transfer targets. In today's video, we are going to take a look at some of the best players you should be considering buying into your FPL team. Now, Gyokeres sounds like he's out injured, so if you're going to be needing to sell him, should you replace him with another Arsenal player in your midfield? Should it be Declan Rice? Should it be Bukayo Saka? Should you be going for a triple up on the Arsenal defense? Is Mateta the best forward to be owning? Should you keep Baltimore if you've got him? So many questions, lots of players to discuss. We're going to go through defenders, midfielders, forwards, look at the fixtures, look at the data, and decide which are the best players you should be buying this week. What is up, everyone? FPL Harry here. Before we dive in, 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you are new around here. Now, very quickly before we get into the main transfer targets video, I know people will be wondering about what I'm planning on doing in my team because Gyokeres has been ruled out of Game Week 11 until after the international break. Now, I've got 3 free transfers and there's been lots of jokes over the past month or two this season that I've rolled my transfers a lot and not used them when maybe there were obvious places that I could have used them. But that's because FPL always throws up a spanner in the works that you then need your transfers for. And here we are in Game Week 11 where I've got them. Now, Iliman Ndiaye is also yellow flagged, having scored on Monday night. We are expecting him to be back available. Apparently, it was just cramp, but we need more of an update on that later on in the week. But with Gyokeres being ruled out, the plan is to use a couple of transfers to deal with him, downgrade him, and probably upgrade Reinders. Now, I haven't fully decided exactly what I'm going to do. I will discuss it more in my team selection video, which will be out on Thursday morning. But just as a bit of info, yes, Gyokeres has been ruled out. Yes, it means I'll almost certainly use some transfers this week. So then diving in and having a look at the upcoming fixtures. And actually, Manchester United are now top of the fixture ticker for the next 6 game weeks. They start with Spurs this week, then it's Everton. They've also got West Ham and Wolves in the next 6 with away trip to Crystal Palace and Bournemouth as the other fixtures. But overall, over the next 6, they have a really nice run. There is also a lot of talk about Liverpool. Now, I decided not to do a deep dive into the Liverpool team in this video. We will then do it during the international break because although Liverpool are right up there and I'm getting an awful lot of questions about them, no one is really looking to buy a Liverpool player this week because they have Manchester City away. However, from Game Week 12 onwards, the fixture run will be right at the top of the ticker. They have the best run of fixtures from Game Week 12 onwards, and there is a lot of talk about whether we can invest in them. Where can we go? Is Salah worth the money? Is he returning to form? Should it be Gakpo or Szoboszlai? Can you go for Konate or Van Dijk in your defense? And we'll talk about some of those players in the video, but we'll mainly do a deep dive during the international break. Crystal Palace are also high up there. You've also got Arsenal, Bournemouth, Brighton. People are looking to invest in some of these teams. Now, actually down at the bottom, there aren't that many teams that we've got investment in right down towards the bottom unless you've got a cheap defender from the likes of Leeds or from the likes of Wolves that you're probably benching. Spurs continue to be down at the bottom. Chelsea do have a couple of difficult fixtures. They've got Arsenal in there, Leeds away, Bournemouth away in there, which is lowering the overall bit of their fixture difficulty, although the next couple still look really, really good with Wolves and Burnley. So if you did sell João Pedro last week like me, you might be looking at it as a potential Gyokeres replacement. I do think the Chelsea fixtures are still pretty good, despite some of the data not necessarily backing it up. Now, having a look at some of the data, Crystal Palace remain the best attack in the league, not only over the last 6 game weeks, but over the whole season so far. They are creating over 2xG per 90 over the last 6 weeks. And Arsenal, obviously, the best defense in the league, conceding just 0.55 expected goals conceded per 90 minutes over the last 6 weeks. Manchester City, Aston Villa, and actually Wolves have actually all improved their defensive data and are up there for some of the best over the last 6 weeks. And again, you will be surprised to see Wolves that high up. I'm not saying you should invest in them, but they've actually conceded a lot of goals from quite low XG chances, but they are letting it in. It's slightly poor goalkeeping, poor defending, red cards and things like that that have, made it slip to the point where they've actually sacked their manager this week. Going back to the attacking data, Liverpool right up there. So when the fixtures do swing next week, there will be a lot of talk about which of their attackers you should look to buy because the second best attack in the league in terms of underlying data over the past few weeks, plus the run of fixtures they've got, make them really good in terms of investment. Now, just to pull out a few other things that we've got in here, Manchester City, Man United and Chelsea, although high up, have actually seen a bit of a decline in terms of their attacking output over the past 6 weeks. And when you have a look at the defensive data, the one that you're probably looking at, Newcastle quite high up there, but again, they have declined over the past few weeks. If you're a Pope owner, if you're a Burn owner, if you've gone with a Malik Chow, there are a lot of you with those players in your team, and you will have been underwhelmed with their performance at the weekend. Crystal Palace, Liverpool, Chelsea, Bournemouth and Spurs, actually there was also a lot of investment in them defensively, and all of them have declined over the past 6 weeks compared to what we saw over the course of the first half of the season. So there are some teams in there which are getting better and worse. It doesn't mean you have to sell the ones getting worse or buy the ones getting better, but it is just something to keep an eye on in terms of trended data, particularly with Van de Ven being the most transferred in defender over the last couple of game weeks. So what I do want to talk about, though, is going back to Arsenal. With Victor Gyokeres picking up an injury that will likely rule him out until after the international break, and with players like Odegaard, with Madueke, and with Kai Havertz all expected to return in a similar time frame to Gyokeres now, there was a lot of debate about who the best triple up on Arsenal is. Now, I had a bit of a discussion on a podcast I was on Sunday about David Raya and whether he's worth it. If you want to have that, it is in the contribution section of my channel if you want to go and watch that in full. Now, starting off with the highest scorers, Gabriel. He is the number one. If you don't own Gabriel, he's a better pick than all of them. If you feel like you've missed the boat on him already and you want to go elsewhere, I don't think I would do that. I would still go and buy Gabriel, even if you haven't bought him already and you feel like you've lost out on the value in him. Outside of that, Timber has scored very well, but a lot of that has come in a couple of big games where he's had a lot of XG and scored a lot of goals in a couple of games. Outside of that, he's very similar in terms of Calafiori in terms of his output. And actually, if I was looking to buy new now, I think I would buy Calafiori over going with Timber. Declan Rice is in next. He's been very consistent. And actually, since he took over set pieces in the second half of last season, he's been consistent for quite a long period of time now. This means that the most in form is Gabriel, Declan Rice. And actually, Trossard, interestingly enough, is very in form. He's ticking over quite nicely with the returns he's got over the past few weeks. But with some of the other wingers returning, like Martinelli potentially, like with Odegaard coming back, could that put Eze out on the wing? I don't think we'll be looking at Trossard. In terms of defensive contributions, Declan Rice is actually number one. Now, that is very weighted because he got a lot of defensive contributions, 20 plus, I believe, in game week 10. Gabriel is next, and then Zubimendi in midfield, which I do think is a general boost to Arsenal as a team. And that is why we are seeing more clean sheets this year than we did last year, despite very similar data, is how well Zubimendi is playing and just how he's always in the right position. As you can see, as we saw in the data, they are the best defense. The attack is still getting better. They're improving. They're creating chances, but it really is the defense that is standing out as the best in the league. When you look at the upcoming fixtures, they have had a few which are slightly better over the past couple of weeks. Maybe things get slightly worse in the next couple. They've got Spurs, Chelsea coming up, but generally the long-term fixtures still remain pretty good. So where do I think the optimal triple up right now is? So there are a lot of questions about the triple up in defense, and I can't put you off it because I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea, but all it takes is one of Saka or Rice or Havertz coming back, or whether it's Odegaard, or whether it's any of the attackers to start returning really consistently and getting goals and assists, and suddenly you'll want to move away from that. And if you've gone triple defense, it will be really difficult to do that, to find which one you want to sell, take one out, find money to upgrade. And it's a squad structure thing more than anything. From a data point of view, the triple defense is great because they're performing and they're outperforming all of the attackers. But from a flexibility and future proofing for your team, I don't think I love it. Gabriel and Calafiori are probably my favorite double up on the defense now because Calafiori is just cheaper than Saliba. He's just cheaper than Timber. But if you want to go with David Raya, set and forget him. I have no issue with that. He's my goalkeeper. He is just up to quite expensive now, though. So if I was buying new, if I was on wildcard, I probably would go Calafiori, Gabriel. I think this is really difficult to decide what you want to do with your second Arsenal defender alongside Gabriel. But I would go with double defense over going with double attack. And then the double attack really for me boils down to going for Bukayo Saka or going for Declan Rice. I do think Saka is more likely to score more points over the course of the season. Declan Rice has done really well, but has outperformed it. There have been a good couple of goals in there. He is taking a lot of set pieces, and while Arsenal rely on those, he looks like a great pick. But with Gyokeres being out, with Havertz coming back potentially and Gyokeres' minutes going down, Saka takes a bigger share in penalties. He's also on set pieces from some sides like we see from corners, and he missed 2 big chances in game week 10. He is getting chances. So I do think if you have the money, Saka is worth it over Rice. It's just what it allows you to do with the rest of your squad, which is slightly what I'm struggling to decide what to do with my team, because I'm almost certainly going to buy one of these, I think, in game week 11. So then looking at the defenders. So again, I haven't filled the whole list with Arsenal defenders, but Gabriel, Calafiori, Timber, Saliba, probably in that order now, are probably the top 4 defenders that you'd be wanting to buy. But so many of you are already on the double up, already considering the triple up. So I haven't gone to put loads of them in, but those are probably the top 4 defenders to buy. If you haven't got a double up or you're considering a triple up on Arsenal, then yes, I would do that before I look at buying any other team. If you want to have an Arsenal defender, if you have a spot available, they are all still the best. Outside of that, I've gone with Daniel Munoz, and I still think he is the Crystal Palace defender to buy if you have all the money in the world. The attacking data is there. The defensive contribution data has actually been better than we thought it would be, and the long-term fixtures are great. He's also just so robust and so reliable for minutes. Someone like a Chris Richards might miss a game between now and New Year. We do see him drop out occasionally. We've seen that in cup games. We've seen that in European games, which is my slight risk of having Richards in my own team. Mark Gay is also there. The underlying data would suggest you shouldn't buy him. He's no better than a Richards at 0.5 million cheaper than him now. But some players are just in the box at the right time and they know how to get attacking returns. And he feels like one of those defenders at the moment who's always going to be in the right place at the right time. I'm not sure I would spend the money on 0.5 over Richards, but if you do have it, I do expect Mark Gay to outscore him, but not be as good as Daniel Munoz. Sandwiched between them, I am going back to Senesi because his defensive contribution data is so good, and the upcoming fixtures, now that they've got Manchester City out of the way, still look really nice. Villa, West Ham, Sunderland, Everton, the next 4 games, you can play them in pretty much all of those matches. Then it's to Liverpool. Now, you're probably not looking to buy them this week, but it might be just worth, with your potential transfers, considering a way to free up a bit of money or to free up a defensive spot next week if you wanted to buy them. Now, interestingly, Van Dijk's attacking data hasn't been as good in the Premier League, but he has done well in Europe. Defensive contribution data over the season, Van Dijk has definitely been better, but actually over the last 5 weeks, Van Dijk has only hit it once. Konate has hit it 4 out of 5 times. It is just worth considering whether Konate is actually just a better, cheaper alternative to going to Van Dijk. If you want a Chelsea defender for the upcoming fixtures, I still would go with Chalobah over the other options. He's just cheaper than the others, and I wouldn't look to try and guess who the second centre-back is going to play alongside him. Achampong comes in and out. Fofana played pretty well. Tostin is getting some minutes. Cucurella for me is too expensive. Reece James is fine. He's just slightly more expensive than Chalobah. And a cheaper option is Anderson. Fulham are okay. If you can play him in some good fixtures, then that's fine. I wouldn't want to rely on him in maybe a more difficult fixture. His defensive contribution data, though, is pretty reliable as sort of a base of a 3-pointer every week if you have to play him. Now, moving into midfield, as I said on the Arsenal section, if you have the money, I do think Saka is worth it. It's just what it allows you to do with the rest of your squad, and whether the sacrifice for Saka is worth it or whether you'd rather spend the money elsewhere. But he is expected by Fantasy Football Scout. Again, you can check all of the predicted points for your players and other players with the link in the description. He is predicted to be the highest scoring midfielder outside of Mo Salah over the next 6 weeks. And we will have a Salah conversation once we go into game week 12, whether we think he's worth trying to squeeze back in or not, or whether you can go for someone like a Gakpo or a Dominic Szoboszlai. Semenyo is in next. Again, a bit like Senesi. Now that City fixture is out of the way, he has overperformed his data, but I still like the upcoming fixtures. I do like Ismail Assar. Him versus Declan Rice is really close. With the upcoming African Cup of Nations, now we do get 5 free transfers, but it is just worth noting that you probably don't want to use all of them once game week 16 does roll around. A reminder for you asking in the comments, that in game week 16, we will be topped up to a maximum of 5 free transfers in game week 16 to help us deal with the players going away to the African Cup of Nations. So maybe you don't want to fill your midfield with Ismail Assar if you have Iliman and Dye, Brian and Burmo also in there going away to the tournament. Then it is Declan Rice. I really like him. I understand that data people won't love him as much. The XG is not as high. The XA is not quite as good, but I think he's just a nice, reliable route. And whilst Arsenal are relying a lot on set pieces, he looks pretty good. Brian Burmo still remains a good pick despite the blank against Nottingham Forest. Long-term fixtures are good. Of course, just note he does go away to AFCON in game week 17. Enzo Fernandez is in next. A couple of blanks, but the data is good and so are the fixtures. You haven't missed the boat if you haven't picked him just yet. Bruno Fernandes is in next. I just prefer Brian Burmo over him. Now, there is a bit of a debate to be had about these two, and we spoke about it a little bit on that podcast at the weekend, where if you're going Brian and Burma, you're more likely to hit a 2-pointer and a 15-pointer in back-to-back game weeks, whereas Bruno's more likely to get 5 every single week. And it just depends a little bit what you want from them. I've got Bruno and I'm pretty happy with that. But would I go with Mbeumo if I was on wildcard now? Probably over him. Then it's Minte, picks up a couple of assists for Brighton at the weekend. The upcoming features look good. His minutes are very reliable and he's on set pieces. He is fine at 6 million and he's probably slightly better than some of the others that you've got. But it is a question that I continue to ask myself with someone like a Minte is, do I prefer him or do I prefer a Virgil van Dijk, for example, in your defense to play a back four? And he's the type of player, along with Reinders, who a lot of you have got, that you might want to ask that question. Similarly as Caicedo, I still don't think I'll be paying 6 million for him, although the DEFCON is good. The attacking returns have been good. The data just doesn't suggest that they're going to continue. If you think they will, and he'll get enough attacking returns every 4 or 5 game weeks, then he's worth buying because the DEFCON is so good. On top of that, I'm just not quite sure enough it's worth it, and I'd rather go up to one of those 6.5 million mids in the likes of Sarr, Enzo, or Declan Rice. And then it's Liverpool. I'd rather buy Szoboszlai over going with Gravenberch, Salah, or Gakpo if I had to buy this week. He feels like he's just got a little bit of everything, but I'm not sure I'd be looking to buy from Manchester City. It's more if you needed to go this week to buy one ready for next week. He's currently my favourite, but we'll talk about it more going into game week 12 over the international break. Then it's moving on to forwards, and we're doing this a little bit differently because I only think there are 5 forwards I'd even consider buying this week. Number 1, of course, is Haaland if you don't own him already. Then it's Mateta, Thiago, Welbeck, and dare I say, João Pedro. I don't think I'm going to go back to João Pedro, but he had more chances against Spurs than he's had in the 4 weeks previously. The next couple of fixtures of Wolves, Burnley, also Leeds and Everton in there are pretty good. The data's not quite as good as some of the others that you've got in here, but 0.37 XG per 90 is still pretty good with the upcoming fixtures that you've got. And with a lot of people selling him, you could take a punt there. But I still think longer term, I prefer Mateta, absolutely, the second best forward in the game. Those big chances per 90 are so good and are so above pretty much everyone else that you're going to get. Then it's Thiago and Welbeck, and I do prefer Thiago long term just because his minutes feel slightly more reliable. When Brighton start to play 3 times a week, I'm not certain Welbeck is definitely going to play them all, whereas I do think Thiago will. Also, when you're buying Welbeck now, you miss the Leeds fixture, which they had last week, which is part of the reason that people bought him. And now that that's out of the way, some of the next 4 are not quite as good. I think I just about prefer Thiago. But if you're not buying these 5, I would probably go down to one of the cheaper ones in Mark Guiu or Kruppi Jr. And the reason for that is a lot of the options that you've just got along the bottom there are not reliable enough for minutes and are not reliable enough for output to take up a spot in your starting 11. And if they're not going to start for you, then they're not worth having with the amount of money that you're looking to spend. Now, if you've gone Voltemada, I probably would hold on to him for the future weeks just because I do expect him to come back into the lineup, but I don't think anyone is considering going and buying him now, given he was subbed off at half time. So if there aren't 3 forwards up at the top, of course, including Haaland that you like, I probably would pick 2 of them and go for one of the cheaper ones. Now, which cheaper one to buy? I probably would go to Mark Guiu now because with Evanilson back, I don't think you can ever be certain that Kruppi is going to start a game. And even if he starts, he's going to be taken off around 60, 65 minutes, which is what we saw against Manchester City at the weekend. So it's not really worth it for that 0.4 million in value when whoever this is likely to be last on your bench every single week. So I actually probably am more likely to buy Mark Guiu and recommend him over going with Kruppi Jr. if you're looking to just play a front 2 formation, which would be Haaland and Mateta as my recommendation. But you could look at Thiago, Welbeck or João Pedro as a differential third forward who are very low owned still. Now, having a look at some popular transfers this week. Now, if you don't have Mateta, I would sell Voltemada, but outside of him, there are no forwards that I would sell him to that aren't Mateta. Into midfield, if you've got Kudus, he's been one of the overperformers of the season. We looked at that on the Fantasy Football Scout website. We looked at it on the members area a few weeks ago, and he was, along with João Pedro and Semenyo, and he hasn't really done much since, so I would look to sell him. As we said in the midfielders section, I think there are better midfielders to buy than someone like Caicedo, who's being mass brought in, but I still don't mind it if that's where you want to go. Then the other thing is for all the Gyokeres owners looking to sell him, and most of you are going Reinders, Some of you will have Anton Stack. Some of you might have another midfielder in here. You can do a couple of things, and it really depends on whether you prefer Declan Rice or Saka. Go for Mark Guiu and Saka, or go for Declan Rice and Thiago. Now, if in the second option you can go to Declan Rice and Mateta, then definitely the second option is better, because Mateta is really an option I like. He's the best striker outside of Haaland. We've spoken about that. But if you can't, and you're going down to Thiago and Declan Rice, and then it's Mark Guiu and Saka. Now, of course, if you have to play them every week, you go for the Rice and Thiago combination. But if you can bench one every week and bench one of your front eight, Bukayo Saka is still the midfielder I prefer, and I do think he will do well. It's just how you value Declan Rice, and that is something I'm trying to decide for my team this week. I think I still value Bukayo Saka first. It's just what the value does with the rest of your team. So that is all for the formal part of this video, just to discuss a few more things. Now, goalkeepers. David Raya is going up and up in price. I still don't think I'd be buying him new now. I find it really difficult because as he gets more and more expensive, one of the Arsenal defenders starts to become closer and closer to him in value, that I probably would prefer someone like a Calafiori. The only issue with going, or the only benefit to going Raya, is you play your double Arsenal every week. Whereas if you go with the defender, as you go Calafiori and Gabriel, you're playing your goalkeeper every week, despite them having a bad fixture. Whereas if you go David Raya and another defender, like a Chris Richards, you can then bench Chris Richards in a difficult fixture. Whereas if you go for a bad goalkeeper or another goalkeeper, then you have to play them even in that difficult fixture. If you're not going Raya, I actually think I'd buy Sanchez now, down to 4.8 million. Donnarumma also with some of the upcoming City fixtures I quite like. Pope, I still don't mind, but up at 5.2, I'm not sure I'd go there. Vicario, if you've got, I probably would look to sell him. Into defense, if you've got Spurs defenders, Van der Ven is probably cheap enough that you can just bench. Elsewhere, I'd probably look to sell. Dan Burn, the upcoming fixtures are not quite as good. You can probably keep him as long as you can rotate him depending on the upcoming fixtures. We've already spoken about the Chelsea defense when we spoke about Chalobah in the defender section. Gvardiol, once we get to next week and the fixtures get slightly better from game week 13 onwards, we might look back there, but I still don't think he's going to get into a lot of the defenders we've got, with the likes of Van Dijk also looking good, with the likes of Munoz, with the Arsenal defenders. Rodon, Mukiele have been good options at 4.1, but actually Tuanzebe of Burnley and Bijol at Leeds are now 3.9 million options. If you need a cheaper defender just to sit on your bench, I probably would just buy one of them now. They do look pretty nailed, look like they're going to keep their place. Into midfield, Mo Salah, it's a real question. I don't think he's worth the money yet. I don't think I'll be buying him in game week 12 or game week 13, but we will discuss it more over the international break. Kudos, we mentioned I'd probably sell. Reinders is probably a sell if you're going to have to start him anytime soon. Pep did say that he wanted to play him in game week 10 against Bournemouth, but he wasn't fully fit. So let's keep an eye on that, because it might be that he comes back in, but I have no reliability that he's going to get any minutes. Grealish and Iliman Ndiaye. Iliman Ndiaye is fine as a hold. I still think I'll be buying other midfielders now, and of course, he will go to the African Cup of Nations. Grealish's goal threat has never been high enough, and we are really seeing that at the moment. Eze is an issue, especially when the likes of Odegaard, Martinelli, Trossard, Saka, Madueke, Havertz, Gyökeres are all available. Where Eze starts is a real debate, and I'm not sure I'd be picking him. If you've got him, you could look to hold him for Sunderland and probably sell over the international break. Foden is not worth the money. I wouldn't go there. Anthony Gordon definitely isn't worth the money. I probably would look to sell him. Morgan Rogers has got some returns recently. If you went with him early on in the season, you are definitely aware of how good he's been recently. I'm not sure I'd be going back there just yet with some of the other good midfielders, but he's one to keep an eye on. Gakpo, I still think I'd prefer Dominic Szoboszlai at the moment, but Gakpo has been quite unlucky. Neto of Chelsea apparently has a slight injury, which has ruled him out of the Champions League midweek. I don't mind him as a Chelsea alternative, but Enzo Fernandez is definitely the pick of the bunch. No real forwards to discuss, as we did that in a lot of detail during that section. And just before we finish the video, a little bit of a Champions League roundup. Of course, there were 3 Premier League teams in action tonight. Liverpool against Real Madrid, Arsenal earlier on today, and Spurs at home as well. Starting off with the earliest kickoff, it was Arsenal keeping another clean sheet. Now, Bukayo Saka did come in with a goal. It was a penalty, but Declan Rice also picked up an assist, which again makes us wonder exactly where the value best sits between these two. It was Marino who came in with a couple of goals. If Gyökeres and Kai Havertz were out for a long period of time, he'd look like a great pick playing up front for them. But unfortunately, unless you're maybe on a free hit this week, you can't really go there. Defensively, again, the clean sheet comes in, just knowing that the double up is just such a good option for you in FPL. Then moving on to Spurs, Van de Ven scoring one of the best goals of the season. There's not too much to talk about for them, though. The upcoming fixtures don't look great. Kudus was not in the squad at all, I believe, which is one to keep an eye on. He wasn't pictured in training earlier on in the week if you are an owner, but I'd probably be selling regardless of whether he's actually available or not. Van de Ven is probably fine to hold and sit on your bench, as we've mentioned earlier. And then, of course, we finished with Liverpool. Now, they do play Manchester City this week, so we're not really going to be going and investing in them this week, but we have spoken about looking at them long term. Gakpo being dropped or benched for this game with Wirtz playing out on the left. Now, it might be because of the fixture and some of the fixtures that we do know that Liverpool have got coming up. That might not happen. It is probably enough for me to lower my expectations even further on what I thought from Gakpo. Dominic Szoboszlai did pick up an assist. We did have a couple of chances created for Mo Salah. Szoboszlai remains probably my favourite Liverpool option because he's also just nice and cheap at 6.5 million. A clean sheet for Van Dijk, a clean sheet for Konate if you're going to have a look at them. Some nice options in defence once their fixtures do come around if you want to take a gamble in game week 12. That is all for the Champions League roundup. That is all for this video. Thank you all very much for watching. 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you are new, and I'll catch you all very soon.